Hey guys, welcome to CryptoCoach365. It's day 114. Mike Tozoni here. Don't mind my hat. If you read it, you'll actually see it's not what you think it is. You probably may recognize this hat as being one that was worn by a student at some university about a year ago, and she got pepper sprayed in the face because somebody mistook what it was for. But these hats were actually created and given out at Miami Bitcoin conference way back in beginning of 2017, about almost 2 years ago at this point. And that was at the Bitcoin conference run by my good friend Mel Levin, who does some of the biggest conferences in the world. So if you want to go to a good Bitcoin conference, look for one of his. I think it's still 000 Media. It's the company that runs it. I actually helped start one of the first ones that was, I worked in accounting, running all the finances for it for the very first one in Amsterdam. I don't actually remember how far ago that was, many years ago, but it's been getting bigger and bigger and better ever since. But yeah, so make Bitcoin great again. Excuse my sniffles. We're still in the process of moving, which unfortunately means that there's a lot of dust. Also a lot of things that were boxed up or packed away that I haven't seen in a while being found. Thus, there you go, I found this thing. So I'm still in the process of unpacking. As you can see, my room is kind of bare. That's a bunch of corporations back there. Yeah, that's what a corporation looks like, just a bunch of folders. Otherwise, it's pretty bare. Part of what I was doing today too was doing some 3D printing assembly, special table for my 3D printer. These are actually plain old IKEA lac tables, but I printed all the parts you see in orange. There's more parts being printed right now too. That's what, if you might be hearing the noise in the background, that's what that's for. And that's just to keep the printer inside these little doors later on. So for some plastics, it needs to maintain heat inside. Some plastics are a little more susceptible to temperature changes, so if there's any kind of wind or light air or cooler air blowing around, or if the temperature is not kept warm around it, the plastic could actually warp while it's printing, and what will happen is it'll either curve at the bottom layers and peel off the end of it, peel off the plate, or worst case, it'll actually start pulling it up and it'll actually separate some of the layers apart. So that's what that is. Because I still need to, part of my hobby, I guess, one way I pass the time is build things, create things like robots, modified furniture as that thing was, things for my plane. Pretty much there's a lot of things that I might need that might not be available in a store, so I just whip them up and print them myself. Cool thing is, it's a way to recycle plastics too. So it might use up a little bit of energy, but it only uses plastic or materials that you actually need for it, as opposed to mass producing. And if I don't need something, or I may collect some bottles or something else, I can actually shred them, turn them into plastic, and print again. And it's kind of, the conservation topic has reared its head up again in the Bitcoin space, which I've actually talked about electricity use or energy use for mining in Bitcoin. But I'd like to touch on that again. For those of you who haven't seen the old or heard the old audio that I talked about a long time ago, the concern is that Bitcoin mining uses a lot of power, which it does. And the concern is that it might use more than, for instance, gold mining or printing papers. And in general, it's thought to be extremely energy inefficient. And that's why we have other kind of alternative coins that use alternative mining options, such as proof of stake, where instead of proving work, where you're having a lot of powerful computers trying to find a solution to a very complex problem. A proof of stake is basically, as long as you have a lot of money locked in and you're staking it in the system, you are allowed to sign off on specific transactions and earn more money from doing those signatures. And the idea is that if you were to write a transaction that is, or approve a transaction that is not valid, then all the money that you have staked will disappear. It's sounds like a good problem. Unfortunately, it has very strong incentives for centralizing wealth. So like, it's basically the more money you have, the more money you will earn. So not really one that I'm a fan of. With regards to proof of work, where you're basically burning electricity to try to run these powerful computers to find solutions to math problems, the concern is that as Bitcoin becomes more and more valuable, or as more and more people use it, electricity use will end up being, Bitcoin will end up using more and more electricity, which that is valid, but that kind of looks at the problem from, I guess, kind of one side, one half of it. The thing that people don't really know in economics is that the more we put a demand on something, such as paper, for example, we've had a massive increase in paper, and the more people end up using it, in the end what happens is not that we start running out of paper, is that the market, or entrepreneurs, investors, start trying to figure out how to create more of the thing that we're looking for. So for example, when we started, when China joined the 20th century and started using a lot of paper in the late 90s and early 2000s, the fear was that there would be a lot more logging, a lot more deforestation, a lot more destruction of the rainforests. But what actually happened was companies started to look for more efficient ways to grow trees. So as a result of China kind of joining the business world and using up a lot of paper, as much as almost the rest of the world, some entrepreneurial types in Chile ended up GMOing some pine trees, which can go from planting to being harvested in about 6 years. So as a result, now they're planting these trees in nice rows in their specialized forests, where they take care of them, and then they cut them down one by one, very simply and easily, because they're all lined up in the row. And they just basically recycle and keep growing new trees. And because of this, they're actually able to produce a lot more paper and use a lot less energy and resources and money to harvest their trees than people who even go out there to harvest trees that already exist. So they're actually saving rainforests by creating much cheaper and much more efficient way to grow trees for paper. And that's actually the way it's been in almost every industry, where we have a massive demand for something. Instead of us running out of it, we're actually finding ways to make get it much cheaper, or even finding some substitutes for them. Like we had a massive demand for whale oil, because we used whale oil as their main oil source for lamps and other stuff. And when that started to become scarce, we found alternatives. We switched to petroleum oil. With regards to Bitcoin using electricity, the concern is that Bitcoin mining will end up using up a lot of electricity. But what will most likely happen, is actually started to happen, is miners are actually pushing really hard to find much cheaper sources of electricity. Right now, they're mainly looking into things like hydropower, and some are actually starting to get into solar. But eventually, a large competing mining business will actually be more competitive if it puts money into research to find cheaper sources of energy. So as a result, with Bitcoin mining using a lot more power, instead of electricity becoming more scarce and us running out of it, which is kind of the, I guess, a generic person's view of what might happen. Like, if you don't know how economics actually works, that's what you might think. What will actually very likely happen, and is starting to happen, is that miners will end up contributing to new ways of generating electricity much cheaper and more efficiently. And then as a result, it's the same electricity that the rest of us use, so the rest of the world will end up being able to use much cheaper, more abundant electricity as well. And because mining is actually the proof of work, is a combination of proof that you have electricity that you're burning, or cheapest electricity you're burning, and proof that you're able to calculate functions very, very fast. So effectively, proof of work is the proof that you have the fastest processors running on the cheapest electricity. In the long run, in order for miners to compete, they will actually be creating much faster processors for themselves that the rest of us will be able to use, and they'll be creating much cheaper and more efficient sources of energy, which also the rest of us will be used. So as opposed to fearing the whole Bitcoin mining is using up so much electricity and energy, I'm actually looking forward to it, because from an economics and market and pretty much historical point of view, that the more we end up using Bitcoin and the more we end up having Bitcoin mined, the more abundant electricity will become and the faster our processors will become. So anyway, sorry if this was a little technical or if I was a little droning out. Like I said, my sinuses are really giving me an issue, and it's been a very long day. But anyway, that's it for today's economic lesson. And I'll tomorrow more moving and getting ready for my trip over to meet our one of our banking associates, and for the rest of the day it's just more unpacking, because we probably have about, I don't know, 3-4 weeks of unpacking to do at this point, because it just looks like it's a never-ending task at this point. But you know, a little at a time, I'm sure we'll get through it. So anyway, that's it for today. Good night.